welcome to Cara's Fast Natural English podcast, the podcast for English learners who want to improve their listening skills by actually listening to and understanding fast conversational English. Well, hello there and welcome to episode 19. Today we'll be talking about listening resources for literature lovers, because I know that a problem for a lot of people in the Leo listening community is that they are big readers, they like reading in English, and no doubt you learned a lot of your English by reading and writing at school. So obviously it's a mode where you're more comfortable than you are with listening, and that makes sense. Listening is a lot more scary than reading. So today I wanted to share some resources that let you combine your love of reading with your goal to understand spoken English better. So there are loads of resources out there now for literature lovers to listen to. So the first one is audiobooks. So this is a spoken version of a book, and these are perfect. If you already have the book, then you can read along as you listen, or perhaps if you've already read a translation of the book in your native language, you can listen to the audiobook in English and it'll be easier to follow because you already know the story. And of course, audiobooks are slower than conversational English. They're typically read in a nice slow pace, so they're a bit easier to follow. I'm going to share some resources underneath this podcast with where you can find them. One source is SoundCloud, and there are several websites, in fact, where you can find free audiobooks, so you don't have to pay for a subscription service or anything. And another resource I've found recently is an app called Blinkist, which lets you listen to summaries of non-fiction books. Just very short summaries. You either read them or you listen to them. Another resource then for you literature lovers are podcasts that are about literature. So these could be podcasts where there are interviews with authors. It could be reviews of books, recommendations of books, people talking about their favourite books, etc., etc. So again, there are lots of resources where you can find these types of podcasts. Earlier I was listening to the Guardian Books podcast, which is mostly interviews with authors, and there are also some good resources on NPR. Again, all the links will be under this podcast. Another idea is to listen to poems. So if you prefer poetry to reading entire novels or non-fiction books, this is a great idea. So again, there are some resources out there where you can listen along, if you like, with the poem as you read. And some of these resources are free. And there are even some resources for English learners. For example, on the British Council website, they have a section where it's all stories and poems. So again, I'll be sure to put the links under this podcast. And then there's kind of a new genre, if you like, that I've recently discovered, which is called a blogcast. So a blogcast, that's a new word, and it's a mixture of the word blog and podcast. So the ones that I've discovered are simply somebody who already has a blog or a podcast who reads aloud their blog post. So again, perfect if you're more of a reader than a listener, because you can read along with the blogcast as you listen, because you've already got the written version. I'm going to give you the chance, once you've listened to this, again, underneath the podcast, you'll find a sample blogcast that I've recorded with one of my blog posts. I'm mixing up podcast and blog posts because of this new word. So because I'm working on a new blogcast resource. So if you download the sample, then you'll get on the waiting list to hear more about that, and you can try for yourself this experience of listening to a blogcast. I think it's interesting because typically people will read a lot more slowly and carefully than they do when they talk on a podcast or when they interview someone on a podcast where it's more conversational. And because the document was written originally, the sort of reading style and the rhythm and the pace is going to be is going to be different, and you'll even hear that from me, because I'm going to, reading aloud a blog post is different to looking at some notes for a podcast and then reading them aloud. So it's a different experience, a different feel, and definitely less scary for you. If you are a reading fan, more of a listening fan, then I think it's a great way to combine the two. Right, thanks a lot for listening. Don't forget to grab your download underneath this podcast and check out the links that I've recommended for you literature fans out there. See you soon. Bye. Thanks for listening to today's episode of Cara's Fast Natural English podcast. If you're listening on iTunes, Stitcher or SoundCloud, make sure you head to the blog to check out the activities to go with the episode. Also, if you haven't done so already, make sure you download my free e-guide to become a Leo listener. Thanks very much to podcastthemes.com for the theme music for this podcast. See you next time. Bye!